Hey guys, this summer I completed Simon Hansen's advanced sprint program, and in this video I review each of the 4 phases, going over the program layout and exercises, and I share the time progressions I saw using my Bluetooth timing system. If you're not familiar with Simon, he's a Danish sprinter who has run 6:58 over 60 meters and 10:11 in the 100. His website has 300-meter programs, beginner, advanced, and elite. I chose the advanced program rather wishfully. Technically, it's written for men running between 11:65 and 10:75, but with a recent best of 11:09, my expectation was that a more demanding program would encourage me to level up my recovery and adapt to the volume. So here's how I got on. If you're familiar with sprint programming, you'll know that GPP, General Physical Preparedness, is where everything starts. This is all-round training aiming to get your foundational strength and fitness high enough to meet the demands of the rest of the program. The first thing to note about the program is that it's the same training week repeated 4 times, though he does say the 4th week can be treated as a deload week. Here's the suggested layout, and for it to work for me, I had to double up on one of the sessions. I also added in upper body on Fridays and low intensity exercise bike on the recovery days. He provides a standard sprint warm-up with dynamic stretching and drills. Then the main sessions in GPP included some high knee sprints, essentially a wicket drill with the wickets themselves being optional, as well as some sub-maximal 80-meter runs in the top speed session, some 150s on the tempo day, and lots of 20s and 30s on the acceleration day. Weights are exactly what you see him doing on his Instagram, including cleans, half squats, trap bar deadlifts, and step-ups. I'm not naturally very elastic, so I gravitate more towards strength and power, meaning I loved doing these sessions. Overall, this was a solid phase. He left some aspects of it open, including 20 minutes of self-selected core exercises, which is probably double what I'm used to, and that was a lot to handle initially. I read Usain Bolt's book earlier this year, and he was doing so much core work, so I probably wasn't doing enough of it before this. As predicted, the volume is more than my body's used to. My quads were quite tired, the acceleration days close to 20 reps, and it also took me a while to ramp up my calories, but by week 3, I felt like I'd fully adjusted. SPP is the specific physical preparedness, so everything now is aimed a bit more towards fast sprinting. With the gym exercises, he works on the reps in reserve approach. So if you're doing a set of 5, it might say that it should be done with your 8 rep max, meaning 3 reps in reserve. This is something I wish I'd been more deliberate about measuring. Some of the exercises I either hadn't done or hadn't done recently, so it ended up being a best guess of my 1 rep max. The majority of the track work was still no more than 95% intensity, which I really liked because it allowed me to fully focus on technique and execution. The volume was slightly higher than the first phase, and my Achilles flared up a few times, and I needed a nightly routine to stop it getting any worse. Again, week 3 was a breakthrough week where my body adapted, and I really embraced the deload in week 4 to give my quads some time to recover. Competition prep was what I'd been eyeing for a long time, a chance to run flat out for more than 30 meters and see where my times are. There were still some 95% runs, and distances ranged from 60 meters up to 120, with some block starts appearing on the acceleration day. In the gym, the half squat was from the pins, and this felt so much more explosive. I was using around twice my body weight for reps with enough power to drive up onto my toes. Hip thrusts featured on both weight days in this phase, and that was paired with kettlebell swings for some contrast training. For the deload, I went right down to around 30 or 40% of the volume, and I competed over 100 and 200 meters at the end of this phase, which I'll go over in the results. My expectation was that the competition phase would lead to a drop in training times with the ability to run fully fresh. However, in week 2, I suffered a hamstring overload, likely from an unrelated series of annual tests I do this time of year, which include a 12-minute run for maximum distance and some other VO2 max tests. Midway through the first session in week 2, I pulled up with pain in my lateral hamstring, which meant 7 to 10 days of reduced volume before I was back to sprinting again. I picked it up from week 3, didn't bother with the deload in week 4, though I did drop the weight session entirely, which at that point was light and explosive work with around 75% of 1 rep max. As far as measuring results, I have the Freelap timing system, which I've been using for the last 18 months, and I've converted my hand times prior to that, so they're directly comparable. My go-to training times are my first 30 meters and my fastest flying 10, and as a reminder, I'm in my 3rd full season as a Masters athlete. Starting with my 30 meter times and adding 0.2 seconds to reaction time, I finished around 440 to 442 in my first season. I ran similar times in my second season. In the indoors, I repeated a 442, which I managed again in competition prep, but for the rest of the program, I could only manage 445 or slower. Moving on to the flying 10s, I was finishing my first 2 summer seasons in 109 before completing a winter program in season 3 that put very little emphasis on top speed, and my flying runs suffered. I wasn't able to go below 111 in winter. I could only maintain that top speed throughout the program and wasn't able to improve, holding 111 across all phases. As a quick bonus, knowing my first 30 and my flying 10, I created these 2 formulas for predicting 60 and 100 meter times. Outdoors, I only had that one race in competition prep where I ran 12:37. Competing is usually worth a tenth on my training time, so I was disappointed not to run faster. At the end of the program, I had a 2-week taper and did a 100-meter time trial using my free lap. And after correcting for a strong tailwind, that was similar at 12:35. It's not fair to compare directly to previous seasons, not only because I'll be slowing down slightly with age, but mainly because the winter program I just followed has sort of ruined my top speed. I would say that Simon's program was good enough to allow me to maintain my speed, but hasn't done much to help me build on it. Overall, given my age and current sprint times, the advanced program was probably a little too much for my body, but it still delivered similar results to other sprint programs I've tried. If you're younger and better conditioned, you may well handle the workload better than I did. I've previously followed programs that try too hard to introduce variety. This program went the other way, making the sessions identical from weeks 1 to 4 in each phase. There's probably some happy medium. There's a few elements of this program that gave the impression it was written in a hurry and not much effort had been put into it, including seeing a few typos and using the exact same drills and warm-up in every session. I also wonder if the high volume was really necessary and whether it came at the expense of quality reps. It was certainly more flat-out sprinting than I've ever done, especially the acceleration day. The gym sessions were a real strong point for me. I thought the progressions in intensity and exercise selection were spot on. If I were to repeat this, I would spend some time to test my 1 rep max for each exercise to make sure I'm using the appropriate weight for each phase. I can only really compare to previous programs that I've tried, and there were certainly some key differences which you'll see in a second. I find that a really nice way of reviewing a program is to calculate the training volume of each element and to compare that to other programs. This allows me to provide a great overview without giving away too much of the specifics. I've created pairs of graphs which compare the weekly volume from this program with my old university program, which I followed in my first year as a master's athlete to get me that sub 1200 meter time. Starting with accelerations, which I define as the first 30 meters of a sprint. So if the workout is an 80 meter run, I would count 30 meters of acceleration and 50 meters max velocity. In my university program, the first half of summer involved as much as 800 meters of accelerations in a single week, topping out around 300 meters per session. Towards the competition phase, that drops to 200 per session and no more than 400 meters per week. Simon's advanced program looks like this. I was really feeling it in my quads in the first 2 phases, and now I see why. 400 meters of accelerations in a single session was a lot to handle, despite the total weekly volume being lower. There's lots of block starts in the competition phase, so that's much higher volume than my university program. For max velocity, which is anything beyond 30 meters, it tops out at 600 meters in early season and 200 or 300 meters in competition. This program only had top speed in 1 session for the first 2 phases, before all those 120s were introduced, with over 700 meters a week in competition. Other differences of note are that my coach was putting drills on tempo days. He would use jumps more as an activation before speed sessions and would have us do Charlie Francis style tempo runs several times a week. In contrast, Simon's program had drills before speed sessions, jumps were done in the gym, and there wasn't officially any tempo running, though I did classify the 80 to 90% intensity runs here, which was the 150s and 120s that formed the early speed endurance sessions. With all that said, I would say the strengths of the program are that it's well laid out, simple to follow, and ticks a lot of the boxes for what's needed in a sprint program. Although he does link the exercises to a video database, sometimes it's nicer to hear a coach explain the cues and what you should be focusing on during the movement, which is something I've seen in other programs. My advice to you is that there are likely better programs out there. While a generic online PDF like this can provide an outline of what to do, there's a level of personalization and nuance to sprint training that only a coach can provide. If you're inexperienced, then working with a coach, especially in person, is going to help you learn proper technique, correct body positions, and all the exercise cues that you don't get from a PDF. I hope you found this video useful. If you're a sprinter, I'd be curious to hear what you thought of this program and how it compares to your own. Thanks for watching.